This is Leadership Beyond, your community of conversation.
Joining us today is Jill Valdez. Jill is the founder and COO of Link, supporting executive directors with strategy to build organizational health, creating more certainty for the future without service disruption. Jill has been helping people for over 20 years, helping with better systems for their company, helping with better communication, helping them overcome obstacles that keep them from being all they are purposed to be. Her empathy, combined with her aptitude for assessing people and connecting their passion to purpose, allowed her to introduce updated processes in order for the team to enjoy greater success at accomplishing their mission.
What I see the most prominent as we talk with Jill is that she is an example of a servant leader who is clear on her purpose. And she has demonstrated that in her journey thus far.
And I love the way she leads with heart. And I love the way she models what she's teaching around communication. Several points in her story where it became clear that she began by saying, "This is where I am," and inviting the other person to come in and be who they are. So she has the knowledge and the experience, but always coming from the same heart. Welcome, Jill Valdez. Good morning, Jill. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, it's great to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, we're so excited to learn from you and talk with you. So as we get started, Jill, if you would just share with us a little bit about your journey and your passion and kind of what got you here.
Yeah, thank you. My journey has been a wild ride full of roller coaster twists and turns. I started out in the nonprofit industry. I was an executive pastor for 17 years and thought that I would be doing that forever. But I walked away from full-time ministry, and at that point got into senior care and found that it was just this amazing place of that was so good for my heart and that I loved doing. Um, and and then started pursuing getting my master's degree, recognizing that all the things that I had learned in the nonprofit world about how to engage volunteers and how to work with employees, business leadership, business acumen, I thought that businesses in the for-profit sector already had all that figured out. My experience has been that church people and church world tends to be a few decades behind what is happening out in the real world. And so I thought they had it all figured out, and turns out they did not. They didn't know about employee engagement, culture, coaching, how to bring out the best in their staff. And so I embarked on a journey of learning more about that, to be able to put some book knowledge to what I intuitively had been doing, and then being able to offer that as a service for business owners, specifically small business owners. In the last few weeks, I've actually changed my shift and my focus to being executive directors of senior care facilities. Their struggle, the work that they do is so incredibly important. The statistics are right now that in America, 10,000 people turn the age of 65 every day.
Wow.
And yeah, that's a stunning statistic. And so with that, senior care is becoming more and more critical, and there'll continue to be this higher demand for it. And the work that they're doing is so amazing. Their heart for others, but then taking all of that and saying, okay, but we still have to run this as a business, and there's still business aspects, and so all those things: employee engagement, workplace culture, profitability, being efficient and effective with operations, all those things are in place. but they don't necessarily know how to make all of those things happen, because so frequently they are spending their days putting out whatever fire may happen to be in front of them. So
Mm.
that's where I'm at right now. Is I'm now really focused on supporting those executive directors of senior care facilities.
Well, we are very much about keeping people and humanity at the center of business life. And the challenges you mentioned can pull us away from that, where we think we got to go off and solve the business problems and then remember why we do what we do. And so you're in the forefront of a growth industry that must stay human centered, or else you take the word care out of it. If you just think of
Right.
it as individual units that are reaching expiration age, I'm being a little bit facetious there, but your heart matters. And I want to ask you about something that will be helpful to our listeners, which is, I had a chance to watch your video about having an experience of being laid off, experiencing the disappointment, but not living there, and then saying, well, what can I do with what I have? So talk a little bit about the resilience on this journey.
Yeah. Um, you know, that might come from my excuse me, my understanding that I have a purpose. Um, we all have a purpose. There's a point to each and every one of us being on this earth. And so when I got laid off, I for one was very surprised. I didn't think I could ever get laid off from hospice. But knowing that that chapter was ending and saying, okay, looking at them, what's next? What am I supposed to be doing next? And I was very fortunate to have my consulting and coaching agency in the background and there as an opportunity. But I had to sit with myself and ask the questions, what do I want to actually do next? I'm older in life, and so to just take a job for the sake of having a job, I don't live that way. I want to be doing what is going to align with my values, what's going to align with my purpose. And so being able to say, what is next? What is going to bring me fulfillment? I actually was talking with a client this morning, and he's kind of on that same journey right now of, he knows that there's something, and he's working on building that resilience to be able to say, I can step away from this and move on to this, and it doesn't change my identity. It simply changes how I'm living out and what that looks like on a day-to-day basis, but how I'm living out what I'm purposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the core of resilience, is being able to say, no matter what, it doesn't change who I am, because my purpose hasn't changed,
Mm-hmm.
and who I am hasn't changed.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. As you tell that story, a few things come to mind that are highlighted for me. One is that you took the time, you gave yourself the space to kind of reconnect with that purpose. Like
Yeah.
that, I'm sure, right? Getting the news of an elimination of your job is jolting, even if you see the foreshadowing.
Oh, yeah.
That
Yeah.
definitiveness of it is jolting, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's a real gift to give yourself to be able to just sit with it, not for too
Mhm.
long, but to sit with it. And
Yeah.
I say, feel the feels, right?
Mhm.
Um, and we talk about this a lot. I have been on camera showing feel the feels,
Mm.
right?
My
That
Yeah.
favorite Adrian moments.
listeners,
Yeah.
yeah, like we've had
And
some
I
real
want to
raw
commend you,
moments where,
because you weren't masking that it was disappointing and that there was pain there. So I hadn't met you. Adrian had a chance to meet you. I didn't have a chance to meet you. I watched that video. That was my first exposure to you. And in a 2-minute video, I could see and feel that this is difficult emotionally. And you're sitting there and feeling it, but then you're not going to be stuck there.
Right.
And so that's what you are embodying and communicating in a short video. And that's what we have to do to support others, because there's nobody who's not going to have the rug pulled out from them in this crazy world. So thanks for teaching that.
Of course. Yeah. There is no stability in any industry anymore. I remember reading on LinkedIn maybe it's been a month ago, where Farmers Insurance laid off like 10% of their staff. And when I was reading through the comments of people who had been caught up in that had been laid off, they've been with the company for like 10, 12 years. And so there's no absolute when it comes to work anymore. There is no industry that is completely immune to layoffs. And so we have to be prepared for always thinking about what would happen if, and what would I do next.
And how do you remember your anchor or your true north, or whichever analogy, if you want the skies or the sea? You reflect on. I'm a sailor, so I'm anchoring. And I'm following a star too, right? To guys. So I'm doing both. But but it's knowing that. It's not having to stop and think about that again, but knowing it at your core somehow. And I think that is the thing that kind of keeps the shakeable unshakable, if that makes sense. But so I imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, that as you're working with leaders in senior care facilities or in your ministry work, these are people that lead with heart. They must, right? They've been called to do that work. And so they're automatically leading with heart. And it's bringing more of that. Well, you've got to focus on the bottom line too.
Right.
And how do you balance those things? And so is that, in the work that you've done, all the years of work that you've done in those nonprofit spaces, how do you help leaders kind of bring those two pieces together, that balance?
For one, the first thing that I do is give them permission to have a heart. I think that it's so easy to get focused on the bottom line, to get focused on the profits. In senior care, they're looking at how many rooms are empty. It's so easy to get focused on that, and to allow that to be the defining metrics. But there's so much more. And that's why my focus is on organizational health, is that it is way beyond what Patrick Lencioni calls the smart behaviors, marketing, IT, operations, those kinds of strategies. But let's look at more of that. And it starts with saying, you have a heart. That doesn't shut off. That doesn't shut off because you're a business leader. And you certainly don't want to have the people providing the care not have a heart, because then they're just robots, and there's so much that gets lost in that. I was talking with a friend of mine yesterday, and we were talking about how I remember, I'm old enough to remember when the expectation is that when you went into work, that whatever was going on in your personal life got left at the door. That's just not reality. With as connected as we are, everybody has their cell phone on all the time. It doesn't matter if I'm at work. It doesn't matter where I'm at. My family's always going to have access to me. Whatever's happening in my life is going to impact how I'm coming in for the day, whether it's going to be a good day, whether I've taken all of my energy and put it into to what's happening at home. You couple that with people working from home, Again, there's none of that boundary. And so giving people permission to have a heart and to lead with their heart, it doesn't mean that you're going to be a soft person. It doesn't mean that you can't be a strong leader, but having your heart activated is going to be a place where you're setting this tone that that you recognize that the people that are working for you, that they are actual people.
Mhm.
And how do you, putting on the lens of organizational health, how do you help leaders, first of all, tell where they are in that area of organizational health? And then more importantly, how do they get on the road to improving it, healing it, whatever words you use?
Yeah. When the easiest thing to do is, there's some assessments that are really specifically even metrics based, which corporations love that, to be able to say, how do we measure that? Because organizational health can feel a little woo woo, and and so there can be like, I don't know about that. But if you're a leader and you're seeing high turnover, if I look at how often are you having staff call outs? What is the attendance? When you look at how many people are attending all staff, looking at how many people are present, how many people are taking action from the meetings that you have. Those are some of the biggest measurements as far as organizational health. It does come down to the people. The organizational health is way beyond HR, but it is about the people. And so the things that I do then, as far as working with a leader, is my strategy is to build the 4 pillars of organizational health, and that's communication, cohesion, clarity, and consistency.
Mhm.
Communication is foundational. It is foundational to anything that is going to be effective. If a team is not communicating, whether that be, and that's a piece of change management, that's a piece of operations, that's a piece of everything, is that communication. If there's not that communication, then there's such a breakdown in efficiency.
And there
I
certainly
have a
isn't cohesion without communication because we don't know what we're speaking
exactly.
to.
Right. Yes, for sure. That's why I say communication is first.
Mhm.
Um, yeah, I've seen. I have a workshop called Cracking the Communication Code, and the differences that I've seen, and even the things that people have said. Like I did one for a company, um, and one of the ladies was like, when she came to realize about how the personalities were different, which is really the core of communication, is personality. And so she came to realize that that her manager had a very task-driven personality, and she was like, I come to work every day thinking that she doesn't like me. And every day I come in with the hope that I'm going to be able to win her over. And every day I go home feeling like a failure. And now I don't have to, because now I just know that it's not that she doesn't like me. She's just a task focused person. And and so she's very direct, and the way that she communicates is different from how I do. And it
Mhm.
completely changed the atmosphere in the room and
Mhm.
their working relationship, as well as the well-being and the mental health of this employee who every day went home thinking that she was a failure. Her boss was like, "Oh my gosh, you're one of my best employees. You do your job so well." But she didn't know that. She didn't feel that, because all she kept thinking was, "My boss doesn't like me."
That's a good example. So we have assumptions and we have perceptions. And if we don't talk about it, we live in that world.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh,
And
Katie Byron once said, I'm convinced no 2 people have actually met. They're having been married 30 years, I have those moments. And so communication is
yes.
not something you do and say, we did the communicate. And Adrian deals with that all the time and change initiatives. Yeah, we rolled it out. We communicated it to the team. Check.
Mhm.
Right. But did you do it in a way that they heard it, that they received it?
And do you have any idea what their perception is when they did? They received it, but how did they perceive it? And then what did they do with it? And so we need to keep communicating. So any secrets on cracking? So we have personality, understanding, perceptions. Any other secrets on cracking the communication code? Do it, and do it more frequently, and do it better.
Yeah. And all of those go back to understanding who you are and how you communicate, and about the people around you, and how they're going to receive what it is that you're going to communicate. How do you effectively communicate? If you're a task-driven person, but your staff are all people-driven and people-focused, then you have to change. Even just adding, "Hi, how's your day going?" to that text before you're sending out a directive, that can totally shift how it's received and how it sets the tone for actual communication to happen. So the understanding that personality of the people that you're working with and communicating to, it's absolutely critical.
And tailoring your style to the need of the individual. Which doesn't mean you have to change who you are and what's important. It just means you have to do two things: ask for what you need and flex to what they need. And it's not either or, it's and both.
Absolutely. It's always and there's no reason why you can't tell people, "Hey," and I've done this because I'm super direct. And so I've said, I, I'm hoping that this doesn't come across as too direct. Just a little, as we're getting to know each other, I'm a very direct person. Know that you can be very direct with me. Again, having that conversation of, this is who I am, and not that it's, this is who I am and I'm never going to change and you have to change for me. Nobody should ever say that to each other. But to be able to say, this is who I am, I'm aware of who I am. And sometimes if I'm really stressed or if there's a lot going on, this is going to be my default. And I'm wanting to make you aware of it so that we can have a good relationship and have that effective communication.
Yeah. So let's put ourselves in the seat of middle managers who kind of have the both ends, right? They've got the talk up to their leaders and talk to their direct reports, and finding that, what does that feel like? And I think about, you said stress, and that's what made me immediately think about middle managers, because I think middle managers are in this position where, they're just squeezed, so
Yeah.
how do we help them?
Yeah. Um, we we help them. That's a great question. We help them with being able to take what's being pushed down to them. And then again, it's, how would I want this communicated to the people under me? If I were, and this is where, empathy and the ability to be able to put yourself in other people's shoes comes into play. Knowing my team, knowing what's going on with them, because that's the expectation. If you're a manager, the expectation is that you actually know your people as people. So knowing what's going on with them, how can I take this and convey it with the same importance, and if it's urgency, how can I communicate it to them to where they're going to get it and they're going to take ownership of it just as much as I have. It's activating that ownership mentality.
Yeah, I think, and it's and a sweet spot is trying to find the authenticity in that, in both directions, I
Mhm.
think, and allowing for the
Yeah.
authenticity on either side of it,
Right.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
another thing you modeled is you lead. And so you led by saying, I have a tendency to be direct, and giving them permission to be direct with you, and also giving them permission to say, I'm not so direct, but you took ownership and began the communication journey very authentically.
And really, this is where some of the other pillars come in to play of the organizational health. If you're a good manager, even if you're a middle manager, there needs to be cohesion. And so cohesion is based on trust, and it's based on accountability. It's based on healthy conflict, being able to have those dialogues. And so when you have a cohesive team, you can take what's being put on you and being able to put it out in a way that your team is going to come around and be a part of, because you're all working for the same thing and you're working together in that. And you've laid that foundation of, we're in this together. We're committed to not only each other, we're committed to the purpose of what we do as individuals and in our individual roles, and we're committed to the purpose and the vision of the organization. That's why we're here. And so we're going to work together as this team to make those things happen.
Talk a little bit about just team dynamics, and like you mentioned conflict, like no conflict, healthy conflict versus not healthy conflict, and how do team dynamics play into that?
Oh gosh, the team dynamic on conflict is that we're all individuals and we all come in with a perception of conflict from our background. Some people are so adverse to conflict that even asking a question can feel like conflict for them, and it freaks them out and shuts them down. I know of a couple of people that are so conflict adverse that, and you see it in terminology like, well, I met with the team and this was the joint decision, as opposed to being able to even take ownership of a statement because they're so afraid of how it might make somebody else feel. Healthy conflict is recognizing that conditions aren't perfect and we need to push through whatever the barriers are in order to get us to be our best. That's healthy conflict. Unhealthy conflict is where you have the same recognition that conditions aren't perfect, but then you're looking at who can you blame, or not taking any responsibility. Oh, well, that wasn't my department, so I don't have anything to do with that. And unhealthy conflict is also, it involves wanting to get my way and what is going to be best for me, as opposed to what's going to be best for the organization and for why we exist and what we're doing. Yeah. So healthy conflict, it's not bad. Conflict in itself is not a bad thing. You think about all the analogies of like a pearl. A pearl is formed from sand getting irritated. That's healthy conflict. There's these two things that come together, and as they continue to interact, then something beautiful comes out of it.
I like to define conflict as discomforting difference, because it doesn't have any meaning there. There is. And so then we can go back to respect, we can go back to values. There's a number of directions we can go in, but we acknowledge up front, yes, Adrian sees that differently than I do. And it may be uncomfortable. And so it really helps us to navigate, to recognize that when you have people together, you're going to have discomforting differences. And if we go into attack or defend or any of the ego things that you're talking about, mine versus Adrian's, then all of a sudden it can be non-productive. But the discomforting difference is just interesting. She sees it differently than I do.
Curiosity.
Where that comes from.
Another C we can add to the list.
Yes.
But the health is that I know that our relationship is more important than the difference. And we don't know how to navigate it right now. And so it's uncomfortable. It's much better when we both say, yeah, that's what we should do. That's more comfortable. But it's not necessarily better. Back to your Pearl example. So dynamic tension is necessary in a dynamic team.
Yes, that's really good. That's a great statement. I love that scene from Ted Lasso. I don't know if you watched, and in the first season, he's talking about the Walt Whitman quote about being curious, not judgmental,
Mm-hmm.
and that's at the core of healthy conflict.
Yeah,
Is
well said.
asking, how is it that you think that? And it could be in your mind, you're thinking, how in the world could they possibly think that? But having the mindset of, I'm committed to this team, we're working together, I trust them. I might not understand, but I still trust them. And we know how to talk to each other and talk through these things. And so being able to say, tell me more about that.
Good.
Yeah.
And I think I'm circling back around to having heart, because I think you hear too many times, to keep the emotion out of it, right? Stick with facts. And I think, this is conflicting information that we're giving out, right? Because on one side we're saying, bring your whole self to work and be authentic, and you're human, be human. And then we're saying, but in the middle of conflict, stick with the facts. Well,
Right.
you can't stick with the facts right now. So I think maybe it's not keep the emotion out of it. It's harness your emotion, maybe, right? You still
That's so
have
good.
it and you need it, but how do you harness it and display it in a respectful way?
For sure. Absolutely.
Right? It's that respect component. Like, I want you to bring the emotion, like be passionate and care about something, but don't attack me. Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the cohesion piece is, we're good enough. We have a relationship to where you can feel safe coming and expressing the emotion. You can be frustrated. I want to be that. For me as a leader, I want to be that safe space where somebody can come to me and go, oh my gosh, I'm so mad, that they can come in and
slam your office door.
Exactly.
But not an excuse for destructive behavior. And so we have to set standards. You can feel however you feel, and there's a time for crying, and there's a time for slamming the doors, but there's also a time to work on our relationship. And if you're only venting your emotions, that is a certain point at which that's not helpful to anybody. And so we don't want to shut them out, but we don't want them driving the whole car or rocket ship.
Yeah. Again, being a super emotional, very big feeling person, one thing I've learned that my husband has said to me repeatedly in our many years of marriage is that feelings are valid, but they're not fact. And so we can feel our feelings, but they can't be considered as facts of the situation, and they can't drive our next actions. We can feel everything that we want to feel, but they can't be the determiner of what my next steps are, because at the core of who people are, we always want to feel good. And so we're going to take actions if we're allowing our feelings to drive us. Oh, well, this feels good today. Oh, I don't feel like coming into work today. Oh, I don't feel like giving 100% today. I don't feel like doing that. Well, that's great. I understand that you might not feel that way, but those feelings cannot just drive what your next action steps are.
So they're a consideration, but not the whole.
Yeah.
Solomon said it this way: be angry and sin not. So if I'm angry, that's valid. If I yell at you, that's not.
Right. Absolutely. When I got laid off, and anybody experiencing a layoff, there's such strong emotion to that. whether you knew it was coming or not. There's anger and there's grief and there's frustration. And I could have gotten very angry, and I've seen people be very inflammatory with the words that they use when talking about the company that they were laid off from. But why? Like, that's not going to make the situation any better. And all it's going to do is just put a bunch of negativity out there that isn't going to, it's not going to do me any good. So, yes, I can be frustrated, but I don't have to be an ugly person about it.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. Anything you want to say in terms of how to connect with you? We'll also put it in the show notes for people that are driving their car, listening to this, or taking their walk. But feel free to.
Yeah, the best way to find me is at www.linkconsulting.info. Or you can also find me on LinkedIn. I spend a lot of time hanging out on LinkedIn and love to connect with people there. And wanted to, if I could give a quick plug, I have an upcoming webinar that is a free presentation of cracking the communication code. And it's going to be on October 31st at 8 a.m. Pacific time. If somebody wants to sign up for that, they can sign up for that on the website. And I love to set people up for success. And so I have a couple other giveaways that if they go onto the website, they'll see, like I have a little ebook on how to bring out the best in your people. So yeah.
Well, we will put all that in the show notes. And we're delighted to be connected to you. And thank you so much for sharing with us today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Thank you for listening to the Leadership Beyond podcast. We hope you benefited from this conversation as much as we have. We invite you to join our community of conversation. Subscribe to our podcast on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to sign up at aleadershipbeyond.com for free materials and updates. That's aleadershipbeyond.com. Join us in 2 weeks for our next episode.